you got to market that in a right way to your employees and make it, if it's important to your company, you should make it a marketable, incentivized job that people actually want to do also.
Every shop I've been to that has that right, you know that it's a great place to work. Welcome back to Machine Shop Tech Talk, or welcome to Machine Shop Tech Talk. If it's your first time here, don't forget to click follow, subscribe, like. But really quick, we're going to get into a conversation because it's so important that we bring people into the trades. And one of the things that's going to help bring people in is by making it a welcoming environment, making it fun. And when we look at making it fun, gamification is something I'm passionate about. I connected with my buddy Steven over on LinkedIn. We started chatting back and forth. And so I know I had to have him on. And we're going to dig into gamification. Steven's got some great tips, some great ways he's brought it in to make his workplace fun. So let's all dig into it. Steven, thank you so much for being here today, dude.
Yeah, nice to talk with you again. I know we only talked for a short while at IMTS, but that's always a kind of crazy mess with people running around. So
It was a lot of fun, but I'm glad we can actually like chill and talk now. It's not like that 3-minute pass by conversation.
yeah.
The gamification. Let's really quick share what it is to you. I know we talk about it and we assume everyone knows what we mean by it. So what's gamification to you?
So gamification to me, like, it might sound weird, but actually like Art of War. So I studied like Art of War before I ever got into like to manufacturing. It was just a weird side take that I went. I realized the concept of how they actually use like Art of War they use concepts from Art of War in like very high-end business management classes and stuff like that. And they translate some of the core skills from what would be like war and how you can adapt them into other translatable skills. And that's kind of something that I did with like, I had a background in like very competitive gaming to where I was like selling online accounts and selling currency for video games. So where it's like, that was a very big part of my life. And I felt like once I got into manufacturing, I realized very quickly I was taking a lot of the skill sets that made me a good competitive gamer. And those were what allowed me to be very competitive in the manufacturing industry.
I didn't know that about the Art of War thing. It's a great book. Anyone that's listening right now, if you have not read through it, I highly recommend it.
And the original version of it is actually very, very short. It's not a very long book. Like, they have like novels where people go into their breaking apart the meaning of it, but the book itself is actually a fairly short book.
Yeah, and it's got a lot of like little like poignant things that you can kind of think about and mull about in your brain instead of just telling you what to think. It's like, oh, I never considered it like that.
Yep.
Or, oh, that's a really good point. So how does that look when you're talking about bringing in, you know, your love of video games and everything you did on the competitive side and bringing that into manufacturing? What kind of mindset shifts or what kind of ways has that impacted your career?
So I say like one of the real simple ones is like with high score gaming, like some of the old video games like Donkey Kong or even like Tetris and certain things like that were kind of more simple. To be at the highest end of like competition in those, the players had to essentially analyze every single variable to be able to shave like fractions of a second off of their times and stuff like that to actually have like that small of an incremental bonus have such a great impact. That in manufacturing is very applicable to like where a part a second faster off of a million parts, translates directly to time is money essentially. And those types of people that are able to analyze all those different variables in the situation and what's going on, I feel like that is a mindset that a lot of gamers have like innately from playing those games, that then if they can translate those into manufacturing, they're very valuable skill sets to have.
It really speaks to just the mindset you have to adapt to become a high level gamer, or even a casual gamer starts to change the way they think at things, what they choose to look at. I know I've done it in my own career as well, right? Where it's like, okay, I know if I level up my skill, I know if I keep applying myself and I keep doing these harder things, I'm going to be able to level up my character. I'm a little more in the RPG camp than the action camp. But so bringing that in, I think it speaks a lot to that. Actually, I caught a podcast with Elon Musk and Joe Rogan, and Elon was going in that he's actually one of the top 20 ranked Diablo 4 players in the whole world. And he's the only one from the Western world that's top 20 globally.
In Diablo 3, I would do like on the challenge list, I would get into like the top 100 every week when I was like back really big on Diablo 3. So
I never even made it in the top 1,000 in that game.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I joke now. My Diablo 4, maybe that's not as hard as Diablo 4 now because it's not as popular. Maybe not as many people playing it. So, but other than that, maybe it's not as hard anymore.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't want. I mean, we could geek out for hours on video
Yeah.
game stuff, I'm sure, but that's not what we're here for
Yep.
today.
Yep.
But something interesting they said in that conversation is they did a survey of all the top surgeons. Any surgeon that played video games was 26% better than the surgeons who did not. And I was just like, holy shit. And they're like, yeah, there's tons of studies and data, and they went into it. You can go find that podcast if you want to geek out on that side of it. But so it's not like bringing gamification into the workspace is a brand new concept. It's something,
Yep.
I think a lot of people have been able to do, and I think it's really important for the shop owners that are watching, or the people that work at companies, share it with the shop owners, because this is a concept that's going to increase the value of your workplace. It's going to make it fun, man. I
Yeah.
love bringing gaming into the workspace because it's like you don't take shit personally anymore. At least
Yep.
for me, I was able to, put down the personal reactions, the oh man, I'm all butthurt because they thought of a better way. It's like, no man, we're all in competition in a friendly way
And
now.
granted, to play devil's advocate to that, I've
Yeah,
ran into there have been people that I've worked with at previous places and stuff like that where I agree with that, where it should be you at that place where you're working, that should be like your co-op team. It should be
yeah,
essentially individual players on that team. Nobody should care as long as they're on your team is winning. You will get certain people, it just is the reality of the world, that feel like if they're not the top scorer on the team, they almost don't want the team to win. And like those people are just, you just gotta get, to be honest, you gotta get rid of them if you got those people. But it's like that should be the mindset of it shouldn't be a competition in the workplace. It should be you're a co-op team that's competing against the other place, and everybody on your team should be rewarding the people that are overperforming, not essentially like feeling bad about it.
you mentioned the co-op nature of gaming, right? So for people that aren't familiar with gaming may not realize that there are a ton of games out there, whether it's a 4-person co-op team or, you've got like the big skirmish 100 versus 100, all the different crazy levels of it. But there's a lot of team building that you can learn in the world of gaming. What have you seen around the team building aspects from gaming to the workplace?
So definitely the idea of wanting to enjoy coming and like joining those people. I'd say that was like one of the
Yeah.
biggest things of like where online I would have certain friends where I'm not as big. Like back when I was really gaming, I was essentially in groups where I would be happy to just come out. Like there were people, living across the United States that I'd never seen once in person, but I felt like I knew them and they were my friends, where I would just be happy to jump on and talk with them. Even if we weren't the best in winning every game, it was still more fun to play with those people that I had like an enjoyment of just conversating with, and just that enjoyability. And same with certain places that I've worked at, like that, knowing that I have guys there that I can just, shoot the shit with, and I have like having that conversation with, it does a lot to where, say you're having a real bad day at work and it's just real stressful, you got a real hard job. Sometimes that little bit is like what takes the load off of that and doesn't allow it to like compound and essentially get worse and worse and have like it building up on your shoulders. It's kind of like that constant release where it's kind of going off a little bit.
There's a lot to be said about the culture in teams, even like you said earlier, where you might have that extremely high performer, but they rub everyone the wrong way because they will even put other people in the team down just to get that little bit higher. And you've got to try to balance that team out, right? In the gaming world, it's common to put people into different roles, right? Like in World of Warcraft, that you're a huge fan of, you've got like damage, you've got your DPS guys, you've got your people that block, you've got your people that heal, you have all of that different classification stuff. So what about that can we take into the workplace? Do you think that comes
So
over?
yeah, and I same with like how I said there's gonna, like with casual gamers and competitive gamers, not
Yeah.
every single person is gonna be super competitive in the workplace. And you gotta kind of realize every individual job, every individual company is going to have different roles that are maybe more well suited towards like, we need a really competitive person in this role based on the requirements that are of it. And they might have
Yeah.
more casual roles at the company where might align more with a person's mindset and the workflow that that person has. And I feel trying to mesh those and even level it out. So maybe if you realize it is a more casual person, but they're getting a lot of pressure from like a competitive nature, maybe knowing to bring that down a little bit. Like say you can't just move that person, knowing how to keep that balance of like keeping that workflow that adapts with a casual gamer compared to like, or again, in World of Warcraft in a PvP server, essentially if you're on one of those servers, anybody can come up and kill you at any time. Where on like a casual server, you can play through the game and essentially never have to worry about that. And some people like that pressure. It gives them that motivation to essentially work harder, think innovatively, think about different types of things if they know that they could essentially be killed at any time. Where other people, like the casual gamer, can really get that system down, really kind of fine tune that system because they're not worrying about all those other extra stresses of somebody maybe randomly coming into it. So it's not that each one is right or wrong, but it's finding that balance for that person and then like creating that environment for them to better succeed.
Yeah, I like that. And that's something that companies could do either within the same company, or maybe there are companies that are more like that PvP. And for those that don't know, that's player versus player. So there's no
Yep.
like missing there. But like there could be entire companies that are more of that PvP environment. And as the guy going to work there, maybe you're like, oh, okay, I don't like PvP. Personally, I avoided PvP servers. They're not my jam. I'm a casual guy. I'm not a highly competitive guy in that aspect. But there could be PvE or more of that casual company to work at that's still going to give you time to shine, still give you that ability to flex and to grow, but in an environment that supports the way you feel nurtured, right? It's not like we're saying either of these is good or bad. We're just saying that there's differences there to be aware of.
And I think I could make a actual direct example to like a job shop environment. So like
Yeah.
say it's like a prototype where it's a part that has to be done for the very first time, really complicated geometry, a lot going on, a lot to just figure it out the first time. There might be a person that's very good at that, figuring out the first time. That might be the PvP guy, where now say that job is coming back and needs to go into production. It needs a really good system to give on to like unskilled people. That might be more suited for like the PvE, the casual guy, to really get that system down, really think about it in a different manner. He's not thinking about how to do the job. He's thinking about taking the knowledge from that job and passing it on to the other person in a more casual environment instead of that high stress, like, oh, I need to just figure it out type of environment.
Oh, completely. It's like the difference between the mindset you program apart or you set up apart when you're doing a one-off versus oh, I need to get this bulletproof because I need to run 10,000 a month. That's a very different person that you're going to want on either side.
Yeah, it's not that I don't feel one is better or worse than the other. It's knowing, and again, it's knowing how your company is built. Like you said, some companies might be more structured towards one or the other, and it's knowing where you fall in that and trying to either pick up where you're lacking or, focus on more where you need focus.
Oh, exactly. And I think one of the times we spoke, you mentioned even on the quality aspect of things, right? The difference is that some people are super, super high precision down to the micron, every single measurement. That's a great fit for the parts that need it. But if you're making something that's got 5,000 plus or minus on all your dimensions, you really don't want that high quality person on that part.
Yeah, and you only got 2 hours quoted into the job or something like that. So it's like, and that person's going to spend like 3 hours on the first article report just to make sure that it's all correct.
Yeah. Meanwhile, it's a clearance fitting for something, and like heavy equipment's a big one for that. So much of their stuff is just clearances, and it's like you got 30,000. It's like, man, you do not need to get that radius down to minutes. Like kind of like the art of war that you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation. It's all about those different perspectives. Something we touched on, actually, I'd like to go back to that, is the alignment and everyone working on the same team. So when maybe we've got some shop managers or owners that are watching right now, Steven, what tips would you have for them when it comes to creating that team environment, whether it's from your gaming experience or from your machine shop? Because I know you've got a lot of experience in manufacturing as well. What tips would you have for them?
One of them is picking apart. Again, every company is going to be ran differently. So like some of that, it is pretty broad question where sometimes knowing a little bit more details is like, you can kind of give a better answer to it. But I'd say like in general, you got to find out, I guess that was kind of where I was talking about before with you too, like a tier list of like creating like a tier list of like what's important to your company. Like essentially saying like, if this department isn't succeeding and isn't like essentially going, we're going to fail. Like that would be like your S tier, your top tier of like the importance for your company. Find out who you have there, or maybe find out who you have within your company that isn't in that department and saying like, this is the guy we really need to get there. What do we need to do to get him interested in this? What do we need to do to like really promote this and put like this department up on like a pedestal to get people to want to do it also? Cause it's not just, you got to play that right. You can't just say like, oh, this is the department that's making us our most money. It's dirty. It's like, it's essentially nobody's going to want to do it, but we just need it. You got to market that in a right way to your employees and make it, if it's important to your company, you should make it a marketable, incentivized job that people actually want to do also.
That's a really smart call, man. And I hope the people out there got all of that, because it's about making it desirable to be in. So if you know there are things that make that job completely unbearable, maybe addressing those to make it a little more approachable or desirable, or putting in incentives, because there's going to be jobs out there that you can't, they're just dirty jobs and there's not a lot you can do, but you could make the incentives, or maybe it's training rewards, or maybe it's rotating in and out of that department. There's a lot of different creative ways, like you said, when they know more information, that they could help to foster that department.
And then in the reverse, where if you're putting up, maybe you're putting a lot of attention into something that's not as important in a company, and knowing where you got to shift some of that and saying like, well, no, this is like, we got to really focus on this. Like, oh yeah, it's that machine that's sitting in the back that nobody wants to run, but that machine's the one that's making us the most money. So it's like, well, maybe we should relook at this instead of just being like, well, yeah, in a couple of years, nobody's going to be running it and we're just going to have to sell it. It's like, what can we do to maybe get people to want to be on it? Instead of like that reverse way of just like trying to look for people like, oh, who can we force onto this machine? Like, who can we pull off of what they're doing? Like, we just need to pull them off of this to get it onto there. Get those people to want to get onto the thing that you actually like need them on. Like, put some type of effort into there instead of just it always kind of like being forced out of necessity.
Well, that's a great point, though. And it all speaks to the teamwork, which is what brought us down this subject line, because it's knowing that everybody that you're working together, you're all working together, and it's not just a couple people on a team, which I've seen a lot at companies where, you know, you got 3 to 4 people on the floor that are willing to sacrifice everything to make the team succeed. And then you've got, you know, a dozen people that are unwilling to budge or to move from their current role, and they just want to do their one thing. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it does show that there's a problem with the culture and the teamwork in the shop if you're always relying on a small amount of people in your company to sacrifice for the good of the whole company.
Yeah, and in gaming, it's called a carry. There's a lot of like where in certain games, it's like they're the carry on the team that is essentially doing all the work, but there's ways that you can look at that. You can be lazy and let the carry do it, or you can be supportive to the carry, give them like, so even in a lot of games, like where there's a real good carry, you can essentially funnel your own money and funnel your own currency in game to your carry and saying like, well, look, I actually want them to do that much better because they're holding my team up. So it's like, I actually am willing to sacrifice a little bit more because they're the ones that are essentially really making it so I can get a paycheck to go home and feed my family, essentially. So it's like, I don't want to be looking at them in a negative way. Like, I want to actually support the carry, knowing that they are putting a lot on their shoulders, essentially. I mean, they call it the carry because essentially it's the idea of like, you're carrying the whole team on your back, literally.
I like what you said, though, about ways. And I wonder what we could do on the machine shop, like on the manufacturing side. Obviously, you can have different pay scales, right? Like a good training matrix, again, tying into the gaming, you see an obvious progression where you can take the steps and add the skills and then get financial incentives across the board as well as you're doing that. It's something that everyone can do. Like you said, if you feel like you're being carried by certain people in there, acknowledge it. Don't feel shame or guilt or be weird about it.
Be happy they're on your team and not the other team. Essentially, like, that's the way I always looked at it. Like, if there's a carry on the other team, it's like, that guy's killing our whole team. He's one guy. It's like,
on the gaming side of things, I used to give up my drops. If I was getting carried, it's like, look, you get all the rights to drops. You get 100% rights. I will take what you don't want. If you choose to choose, you could take all the loot from the whole run, dude. I don't care. You're carrying me.
And a lot of that, it is knowing your individual team, because it's not every team is going to be the same, but it's knowing how to work with the mindsets. And that's where I said too, like creating that workflow so that everybody is in their right workflow so that they can be supportive of the carry then, so that they aren't feeling so they feel like they're not competing against the carry. Because that's where the problem comes in. If you have an individual on your co-op team that somehow feels like his manager is making him compete against the carry, where that carry just is like an obvious, unique outlier where you can't expect
Yeah.
everybody on the team to compete at the level of the carry. That's just not a realistic mindset. And sometimes I feel that there'll be a company that will get that carry and then expect everybody else to compete at that level and then hold those other guys like accountable for not performing at that level. And that can't be done either, because then it's no longer a co-op team anymore.
And that's a great place for us to wrap up our conversation, is having that awareness of your team, what's needed, because every human that works for you is going to be a little bit different. But if you can make it fun and you can make it a space where you can have these conversations and have people being willing to shift or to see things as they are versus trying to hide and defend and play the whole ego game, which is no fun for anyone, including the person with the ego issue, right? Like, it's no fun for them either, because there's something going on inside them that they're not communicating. It's just no good. But so if we focus on that communication, we focus on that awareness, and we focus on working together, feeling like we're on the same team. Every shop I've been to that has that, right, you know that it's a great place to work. Thank you so much, Steven, for this conversation. I am so excited for people out there to get this, and maybe we can shift some minds out there, dude.
That's what I'm trying to do, so.
Well, thank you, everyone. If you made it this far in the video, I know you were loving what we were putting down. It's only about 10% of you that make it this far, so if you're part of that 10%, drop a like, drop a subscribe, drop a comment. Tell us what had you stay to the end of the conversation. Let's be real, it was probably Steven. And to all my machining friends out there, keep your spindles turning and earning.